My name is Elise Harper, and I'm telling you this story because I want you to understand what it's like to have your entire world crumble, to feel the ground beneath you give way, and then to rebuild yourself stronger than you ever thought possible. I'm 32, a marketing director at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle, and I've always been the kind of person who plans everything down to the smallest detail: my career trajectory, my weekend hikes, even the way I organize my spice rack. I thought I had my life all figured out, especially when it came to my best friend, Tara. She was the sister I never had, the one who knew my coffee order, black with a splash of oat milk, my deepest fears, spiders and failure, and my wildest dreams, a cozy house in the mountains with a wraparound porch. We met in college, two awkward freshmen bonding over late-night study sessions and cheap boxed wine, and for 12 years, she was my rock, my confidant, my safe place. But even the sturdiest rocks can crack. And sometimes, they hide jagged edges that cut deep. This is the story of how Tara betrayed me, how it shattered me into a million pieces, and how I pieced myself back together, not with violence, but with a plan so meticulous, so clever, it felt like I was painting a masterpiece with their downfall as my canvas. It all started on a rainy Tuesday in March, the kind of day where Seattle's skies hang low and heavy, a gray so thick it seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you're moving through molasses. I was at my desk on the 14th floor of my office building, sipping a latte and scrolling through a client's branding brief, when my phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "Dinner tonight? Need to talk." Her messages were usually bursting with emojis, hearts, winking faces, little coffee cups, but this one was cold, almost formal. I frowned, my thumb hovering over the screen. Maybe she was stressed about her new job at that flashy PR agency she'd been obsessed with since she landed it 3 months ago. I typed back a quick "sure, 7 at Luigi's?" and tried to focus on my work, but a tiny knot of unease settled in my stomach, tightening with every passing hour. Luigi's was our spot, a cozy Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street near Pike Place Market. The walls were lined with black and white photos of old Italy, the tables covered in red checkered cloths, and the air always smelled like garlic and fresh basil, warm and comforting. I arrived a few minutes early, my umbrella dripping as I shook it out by the door, and spotted Tara already seated at our usual table in the corner. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, her face pale under the flickering candlelight. She looked off. Her smile was strained, like she was forcing it, and she'd already ordered a glass of red wine, which she clutched like a lifeline. "Elise," she said as I sat down, her voice low and unsteady, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart thudded in my chest, the knot in my stomach twisting tighter. I leaned in, expecting her to confess a work blunder or a fight with her boyfriend, Greg. Maybe she'd lost a client, or maybe Greg had forgotten their anniversary again. But then she looked me in the eyes, her gaze steady for the first time that night, and said, "I've been seeing Daniel." Daniel, my fiancé of 3 years, the man who'd proposed to me on a snowy hike in the Cascades, his breath fogging in the cold air as he knelt and promised to build a life with me. The man who'd laughed with me over burnt pancakes on lazy Sundays. Who'd held me when my dad passed away 2 years ago, who'd whispered "I love you" every night before we fell asleep. I laughed at first, a sharp, disbelieving sound that echoed in the small restaurant, because it had to be a joke. Tara didn't laugh. She just sat there, her fingers twisting the stem of her wineglass, her lips pressed into a thin line, and that's when I knew. The air felt too thick to breathe, the restaurant too loud with the clatter of dishes and the hum of other conversations. I could smell the garlic bread on the table, hear the faint jazz playing over the speakers, see the way her eyes darted away from mine, unable to hold my gaze. "It started 6 months ago," she said, her voice flat, like she was reading a script. "We didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. 6 months. 6 months of lies while I planned our wedding, while I gushed to Tara about venues and dresses and honeymoon destinations, while she nodded and smiled and told me how lucky I was. All while she was sleeping with my future husband." I don't remember what I said next. My mind was a roaring blank, my chest so tight I thought I might collapse. I think I just stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and walked out, leaving my coat on the back of the chair. The rain hit me like a slap as I stepped outside, soaking through my blouse, my shoes squelching with every step. I didn't care. I walked all the way home, 3 miles in the pouring rain, and by the time I got to my apartment, I was shivering, my hair plastered to my face. I sank onto my couch, still in my wet clothes, and stared at the engagement ring on my finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond, chosen because Daniel said it was classic, like you. I cried until my throat burned, until my eyes were swollen and my chest ached, until I had no tears left to give. That night, I called Daniel. I don't know why I bothered, I already knew the truth, but I needed to hear it from him. He answered on the second ring, his voice hesitant. Elise? I didn't waste time with small talk. Is it true? I asked, my voice shaking. Are you with Tara? There was a long silence, and then he sighed, a defeated sound that made my stomach lurch. Yes, he said, and that one word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He didn't even try to deny it. He mumbled apologies, something about not meaning to hurt me, and it just happened, but it all sounded hollow, rehearsed. I hung up, my hands trembling, and watched as he packed a bag and left our apartment an hour later, his head down. Avoiding my gaze, the door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. The next few weeks were a blur of pain, a haze I couldn't escape. I called in sick to work, claiming a stomach bug, and locked myself in my apartment, the blinds drawn tight against the gray Seattle light. I couldn't eat, every bite tasted like ash. I couldn't sleep, every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tara's face, her smug expression as she confessed, or Daniel's back as he walked out the door. My apartment, usually spotless, became a mess of takeout containers, unopened mail, and crumpled tissues. I'd sit on my couch for hours, staring at my phone, rereading Tara's old texts, looking for signs I'd missed. There was one from a month ago, sent after I'd shown her my wedding Pinterest board. You're so lucky to have Daniel. He's perfect. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room, to erase every trace of her from my life. I kept replaying every moment we'd shared, every coffee date where we'd laughed until our sides hurt. Every late-night call where I'd poured my heart out, every time she'd hugged me and said, I'm here for you, always. How could someone I trusted so completely, someone I loved like a sister, stab me in the back like this? I felt like a fool, like every memory we'd built was a lie, a cruel joke I'd been too blind to see. I stopped showering, stopped answering texts from friends. My mom called, worried, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, I was too ashamed. I felt like I'd failed. Like I wasn't enough to keep Daniel, wasn't enough to deserve Tara's loyalty. I'd look in the mirror and see a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, broken. But somewhere in that darkness, a spark flickered. It was small at first, barely a glow, but it grew every time I thought about Tara's confession, the way she'd sat there without a shred of remorse, expecting me to just accept it. She hadn't even apologized, not once. And Daniel, with his weak excuses, his refusal to fight for us, wasn't any better. They'd taken my trust, my future, my happiness, and tossed it aside like it meant nothing. I couldn't let that be the end of my story. I didn't want to be the girl who got betrayed and faded into the background, a cautionary tale whispered about at parties. I wanted them to feel what I felt, not pain, not exactly, but consequences. I wanted justice, the kind that would make them think twice before they ever hurt someone again. So, one night, after a glass of wine and a long, ugly cry, I grabbed a notebook from my desk and started planning. My hands shook as I wrote, but with every word, I felt a little stronger, a little more in control. If Tara and Daniel thought they could walk away unscathed, they were wrong. I was going to show them exactly who they'd messed with. The first step was understanding my targets, mapping out their weaknesses like a general preparing for battle. Tara was ambitious, always chasing the next big thing, and her new job at the PR agency was her golden ticket. She'd bragged nonstop about landing a major client, a tech startup called Nexlify, whose CEO, a man named Victor Chen, was notoriously picky and had a reputation for firing agencies over the smallest misstep. Tara's entire career hinged on keeping Victor happy. Her reputation at the agency was everything to her. I knew she was good at her job, but I also knew her flaws. She was sloppy with details, always cutting corners, relying on charm to smooth things over. Back in college, she'd begged me to proofread her papers because she couldn't be bothered to check her own work. That was my in. Daniel, on the other hand, was a freelance graphic designer, talented but lazy, the kind of person who'd rather talk his way into a gig than put in the hard work to earn it. He'd been living off my savings for months, promising to pay me back when his next big project came through, but those projects never seemed to materialize. He was obsessed with his online portfolio, a sleek website he'd spent hours tweaking, bragging about how it sold itself. But I knew something he didn't: the domain for that precious portfolio was registered in my name. I'd paid for it 2 years ago when he was broke, a temporary favor he'd never bothered to change. I logged into the registrar one night, my heart pounding, and confirmed I still had control. Their weaknesses were my weapons: Tara's career and Daniel's ego. I wasn't going to break any laws or hurt anyone physically. My revenge would be clean, clever, and devastating. It would hit them where it hurt most, stripping away the things they valued above all else. I started with Tara, knowing her pitch to Nexlify was the perfect opportunity to strike. I needed to understand the battlefield, so I did some digging. I created a fake LinkedIn profile, posing as a junior PR assistant named Megan Carter, and connected with a few people in Tara's agency, casually messaging them about their work. Through those conversations, I learned that Victor Chen was obsessed with authenticity. He hated anything that felt corporate or contrived, and Tara's last pitch to him had already left him unimpressed. She was on thin ice, and her big campaign pitch in 2 months was a make-or-break moment for her. I also learned she was under pressure from her boss, a woman named Carla, who'd made it clear that losing Nexlify wasn't an option. That was my opening, and I intended to exploit it to the fullest. Next, I turned my attention to Daniel. His portfolio was his lifeline, the thing he relied on to impress clients and keep his career afloat. But with the domain in my name, I had the upper hand. I didn't want to destroy his site outright; that would be too obvious, and he'd know it was me. Instead, I decided on a subtler approach, one that would make him question his own competence without ever suspecting I was behind it. I spent hours building a replica of his site, using the same sleek design, the same project thumbnails, the same minimalist font. But I slipped in tiny changes, the kind that would raise red flags for any discerning client. His bio now had typos: experience instead of experience, client instead of client. His project descriptions were slightly exaggerated, claiming he'd worked on campaigns he'd only pitched for, and one of his client testimonials was from a company that didn't exist. I made up a name, Blue Wave Innovations, and wrote a glowing review that sounded just a little too perfect. I also added a contact form that sent inquiries to a dead-end email I controlled, ensuring he'd never see the messages. It was subtle sabotage, the kind that would make clients question his professionalism and reliability without him realizing why they were backing away. I set the redirect to go live the same week as Tara's pitch, timing it for maximum chaos in both their lives. For weeks, I worked in secret, my apartment transforming into a war room of notes, spreadsheets, and half-empty coffee mugs. I'd come home from work, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and pour myself a cup of chamomile tea, the steam rising in delicate curls as I sat at my kitchen table and planned. My notebook was filled with timelines, contingencies, and little sketches of ideas, arrows connecting Tara to Nexlify, Daniel to his portfolio, me to the anonymous email accounts I'd created. It felt good, like I was taking back control, like I was weaving a web they'd never see until it was too late. I barely thought about the wedding I'd lost or the friend I'd trusted. Instead, I focused on the details, the timing, the execution. I wasn't just Elise, the betrayed fiancée anymore. I was Elise, the architect of their downfall, and with every passing day, I felt a little more like myself again. Tara's pitch was the first domino, and I planned it down to the smallest detail. I knew she'd be preparing a massive presentation, probably recycling old ideas because she was too arrogant to start fresh. She'd always been like that, overconfident, assuming her charm would carry her through. So, I created an anonymous email account, industry_insider92@gmail.com, and sent a tip to Victor Chen, posing as a concerned colleague. I didn't lie, I just pointed out that Tara's last campaign for another client had been criticized for being inauthentic and included a link to a scathing blog post I'd found online, written by a small-time tech journalist who'd called her work soulless. I also hinted that her upcoming pitch might lean heavily on outdated trends, planting just enough doubt to make Victor question her. Then, I took it a step further. I crafted a fake email from a consultant named Alex Reed, offering Tara free data on NextLife's target audience. Data I'd pulled from public sources but skewed to make her pitch sound generic and out of touch. I knew she'd take the bait, she was always looking for shortcuts. Sure enough, she emailed back within hours, her tone eager, thanking Alex for the help. I could almost see her smug smile as she thought she'd outsmarted everyone, unaware that I was the one pulling the strings. The day of Tara's pitch, I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't focus at work, my hands trembling as I pretended to type emails, my mind racing with what-ifs. I'd asked a coworker, a sweet girl named Priya who owed me a favor, to casually attend the public portion of NextLife's event. Posing as a freelance journalist. She texted me afterward, her message short but electrifying: Tara bombed. Big time. Priya said Tara's presentation was stiff, full of buzzwords like synergy and disruptive innovation, the exact kind of corporate jargon Victor hated. When he questioned her data, pointing out inconsistencies, Tara fumbled, her face flushing as she tried to backtrack. The blog post I'd sent had clearly spooked him, and he'd grilled her on authenticity, asking pointed questions she couldn't answer. She didn't lose the account that day, but Priya overheard Carla pull her aside afterward, her voice sharp and cold: "Fix this, or you're done." Tara's golden ticket was slipping through her fingers, and I felt a rush of satisfaction so strong it scared me. I sat in a coffee shop across town, the rain pattering against the windows, and sipped my latte, a small smile playing on my lips. Step 1, complete. Daniel's reckoning came hours later, and it was almost too easy. I'd set the redirect on his domain to go live that morning. And by noon, he was calling me in a panic. "Elise, my site's messed up," he shouted, his voice high and frantic. "Clients are emailing me about typos, and I'm losing gigs left and right." "Did you do something?" I played dumb, my voice calm and steady as I said, "I don't know what you're talking about, Daniel. Maybe you should check your domain settings." I hung up before he could say more, my heart racing with adrenaline. I could imagine him scrambling at his laptop, his precious portfolio now a liability. His ego bruised as clients ghosted him. By the time he figured out the redirect and fixed it, the damage was done. 2 major clients dropped him, citing unprofessionalism, and his inbox was flooded with complaints. His precious portfolio, the thing he'd staked his entire career on, was tarnished, and I hadn't even had to lift a finger. I didn't stop there. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal together, to understand the depth of what they'd done to me. I knew they were still seeing each other, mutual friends had mentioned it in passing. Though I'd cut those ties as soon as I found out they'd known and said nothing. So, I sent them both an anonymous package, mailed from a post office across town to avoid suspicion. Inside each was a photo of Tara and me from college, taken at a Halloween party where we'd dressed as salt and pepper shakers, laughing with our arms around each other. On the back, I'd written a note in neat, careful handwriting: "Trust is fragile. So are reputations." I didn't sign it, but I knew they'd guess it was me. I wanted them to look at each other and wonder, to feel the paranoia I'd felt, to question every lie they'd told. Let them stew in their own guilt, their own mistrust. Months passed, and I watched from afar as their lives unraveled, piece by piece. Tara's agency put her on probation, and NextLify officially dropped them, going with a competitor instead. She posted vague, dramatic quotes on social media about haters and jealousy, but I could tell she was shaken. Her posts were less frequent. Her confidence gone. Daniel's freelance career stalled completely, and I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved back to his parents' place in Tacoma, his tail between his legs. They didn't last as a couple, cheaters rarely do. I heard they'd had a messy breakup, accusing each other of the very things they'd done to me. It was almost poetic. As for me, I started healing, slowly but surely. I went to therapy, pouring my heart out to a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, who helped me see that their betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth. I redecorated my apartment, painting the walls a soft sage green, filling the space with plants and cozy throws until it felt like a sanctuary again. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion to senior marketing director after I landed a major client of my own. I started running again, my sneakers pounding the pavement along the Puget Sound. The salty air filling my lungs as I pushed myself harder, faster, reclaiming my strength. I even went on a few dates, not because I was ready for love, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could still feel something, still laugh, still hope. The engagement ring was long gone, sold to fund a solo trip to Italy, where I spent 2 weeks wandering cobblestone streets, eating gelato under the Tuscan sun, and listening to street musicians play hauntingly beautiful melodies on their violins. I laughed without faking it, cried without shame, and felt the weight of the past lift, little by little. Looking back, I don't regret what I did, not for a second. Tara and Daniel thought they could break me and walk away, but I showed them I'm stronger than that. I didn't need violence or screams to win. I used my brain, my patience, and my pain to build something better than revenge, justice. They'd taken everything from me, my trust, my future, my happiness, but I took it back. Piece by piece, until I was whole again. The lesson here isn't about holding grudges or getting even. It's about knowing your worth, about understanding that trust is precious, and when someone shatters it, you don't owe them your silence or your forgiveness. You owe yourself the strength to rise, to fight, to reclaim your story. I did, and I'm never letting anyone write my ending again.